22 years of marriage, and it took $16.8 million to find out what I was actually worth to my wife. Turns out the number was zero. Turns out her family had a different math entirely, and it was written in a document none of them had read carefully enough. My name is Billy White. I'm 54 years old, and I've been an HVAC technician in Kansas City for 28 years. I know what hot looks like. I know what cold looks like. And I know the specific feeling of being in someone's basement in August, fixing a unit that should have been replaced a decade ago, while the homeowner stands over your shoulder asking why it's taking so long. I am not a glamorous man. I drive a work van with my name on the side, and I have a tool bag that weighs 40 pounds, and I have calluses on my hands that have been there since my 20s, and I am fine with every single one of these facts. Sandra and I met at a company picnic in 2001. She worked in the billing department of the HVAC company I was with at the time, before I went independent. She was funny and direct, and she laughed at my jokes with the specific quality of someone who actually found them funny rather than someone being polite. We dated for 2 years. We got married at a park in Brookside on a Saturday in September 2003. Her family had opinions about me from the beginning, not expressed dramatically. They were too composed for that, but present. The specific way Phyllis Grover would look at Sandra when I said something about work. The way Ronnie asked questions about my income with the thin veil of casual curiosity. The way Lena described me to her friends at the wedding rehearsal dinner as Sandra's interesting choice. I am paraphrasing but not exaggerating. Sandra's family had money in the old Kansas City way, not generational wealth exactly, but accumulated respectable, several notches above HVAC technician on the social geography they operated within. They did not say I wasn't good enough for Sandra. They simply arranged their expressions in ways that communicated it without requiring words. Sandra's mother, Phyllis, had insisted on a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. Sandra presented it to me 3 weeks before the ceremony with the expression of a woman who was embarrassed about her mother's request and unsure how to frame it. She just wants things clear, Sandra said. I read the document. It was drafted by the Grover family attorney. It specified in the careful language of legal documents that in the event of divorce, any assets brought into the marriage by either party would remain with that party, and that marital assets would be divided equally. I had no assets to speak of at the time. I had a work van, a set of tools, and a savings account with a few $1,000s in it. Sandra had a modest inheritance from her grandmother and a small investment account. I signed the prenup. Not reluctantly, I signed it because it seemed fair, and because I wasn't marrying Sandra for her grandmother's money, and because I had no reason to think it would ever be relevant. That was 22 years ago. I had not thought about that document in at least 15 years. I was about to think about it a great deal. Friday, September 19th, 8:47 p.m. Sandra and I were in the kitchen of our house on 75th Street in the Waldo neighborhood, a house we'd bought together in 2009 with both of our names on the mortgage, both of our income tax returns in the application, both of our signatures on the 30-year note. Sandra was at the counter with her phone. I was washing the dinner dishes. Billy. Her voice was different, not excited, stunned. The specific vocal quality of a person whose brain has received information it cannot yet process. Yeah, come look at this. I dried my hands, walked over, looked at her phone. Missouri Lottery Powerball results, Friday, September 19th, and Sandra's ticket numbers matched one by one to the screen, all 6. I looked at the screen for a moment, then at Sandra, then back at the screen. Sandra, I said carefully, are those your numbers? She held up the physical ticket with a hand that was shaking. I bought it on my lunch break. I buy one every week. I've been buying one every week for 8 years. I looked at the ticket, looked at the screen. $16.8 million, lump sum after federal and state taxes, approximately $11 million I would later learn. Before taxes, the advertised amount, $16.8 million. My wife had just won $16.8 million. I stood in my kitchen on 75th Street and felt something that was not quite happiness and not quite disbelief, but somewhere in between. The particular suspended quality of a moment that hasn't fully landed yet. Sandra was crying. Good crying. The overwhelmed, incredulous crying of someone who has received something enormous. I put my arms around her and she held on, and we stood in the kitchen for a few minutes while the reality tried to become real. I didn't know it yet. Didn't know that the phone call she made after mine would change the trajectory of everything. I didn't know that Phyllis Grover was going to have opinions. I didn't know that the document I'd signed 22 years ago in the Grover family attorney's office was going to become the most important piece of paper in my recent life. I just knew my wife had won the lottery, and I was happy for her. That was Friday night. Saturday morning, September 20th. Sandra was up early when I came downstairs. She was on the phone, animated. The kitchen energy different from Friday night's stunned quiet. I could hear from the tone that she was talking to family. I made coffee. Waited. She hung up at 8:15 with an expression I couldn't fully read. Not the expression from last night. Something more organized than that. Decided. I need to go to Mom's, she said. Of course. I'll come with you. A pause. Actually, I think it should just be family right now. Just family. I was her husband of 22 years. But I looked at her face and I understood, with the specific comprehension that comes after 2 decades of knowing someone, that the word family in that sentence had a particular definition that did not include me. Okay, I said. She left at 8:30. She came back at 2 p.m. She sat down at the kitchen table across from me with the composed expression of a woman who has made a decision in a room full of people who have opinions and has arrived home to deliver the result. Billy. Her voice was careful, rehearsed in the way of someone who has practiced a sentence. I've been doing a lot of thinking with my family about what this means, about the future. And I think we want different things. I think this is a moment where we should be honest about that. I looked at my wife, 51 years old, 22 years of marriage, the woman who had laughed at my jokes at a company picnic in 2001. Sandra, I said, are you telling me you want a divorce? I think it would be better for both of us. Both of us. The generous framing. The one that makes it seem mutual. Because you won the lottery, I said. She had the grace to not answer immediately. But she didn't deny it either. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. We'll work out the details. You can stay here while we figure things out. But I could hear, underneath that, the real timeline, which was, while the attorneys figure out how little you're entitled to. I called Dale Pruitt from the work van in the driveway. Dale has been my best friend since high school, and has the quality of answering the phone at any hour with the energy of a man who was already awake. Dale. Sandra won the lottery. What? 16.8 million. Powerball. Billy. Holy. She went to her mother's this morning and came back wanting a divorce. Silence. The specific silence of a best friend processing 2 enormous pieces of information simultaneously. She? Yes. The day after, the morning after Dale. A long pause. Billy. What do you need? I need an attorney, I said. A good one. Someone who knows Missouri divorce and asset law and who is not going to be impressed by the Grover family. I know someone, Dale said. Mitch Farrow. He's in the Plaza District. I'll call him right now. Tell him I need to see him Monday. I'll tell him tomorrow, Dale said. He owes me a favor. I sat in the work van in the driveway of the house I'd helped buy on 75th Street and looked at the front of it. 22 years. The gutters I'd cleaned last fall, the porch light I'd replaced twice, the driveway I'd sealed 2 summers ago on a Saturday while Sandra brought me water. I didn't know yet about the prenup. I knew the prenup existed. I had simply not thought about it in 15 years, and had certainly not thought about what it said in the context of lottery winnings. That was about to become the most interesting legal question of my marriage. Welcome back to Dad's Sweet Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. You're going to want to be here when Mitch Farrow reads that prenup. Sunday, September 21st. Phyllis Grover called me at noon. I almost didn't answer. Then I decided that information was information regardless of its source, and picked up. Billy. Her voice had the warmth of a woman delivering something unpleasant while maintaining plausible civility. I just wanted to check in, make sure you're doing okay with everything. I'm fine, Phyllis. This is hard for everyone. Sandra she needs space to figure out what she wants. She seems to know pretty clearly what she wants. Well. A pause that had a smile in it I couldn't see but could hear. Sometimes these things just clarify things, you know? About compatibility. about where people are going. I let that sit for a moment. Compatibility, where people are going. Phyllis, I said, I've been compatible with your daughter for 22 years. I showed up to that compatibility every single day. Of course you did, Billy. Of course. The tone of someone patting a dog. We just want what's best for Sandra. I'm sure you do, I said. We'll see how the attorneys sort it out. She laughed lightly, the laugh of a woman who believed the attorneys were going to sort it out in one direction and one direction only. I hung up. I didn't know yet that Phyllis Grover had been the one to insist on the prenup in 2003. I didn't know that she had specifically instructed the family attorney to include language about marital assets. I didn't know that in trying to protect Sandra's grandmother's money from a man she didn't consider good enough, Phyllis had written a document that was about to make that same man significantly wealthier than she'd ever intended. But Monday morning was coming, and Mitch Farrow had read the prenup. The best legal documents are the ones that do exactly what they say. The worst legal documents are the ones that do exactly what they say, when what they say turns out to be the opposite of what the person who wrote them intended. Monday, September 22nd, 9 a.m., Mitch Farrow's office in the Country Club Plaza district occupies the second floor of a building on Nichols Road, with a view of the fountains that the plaza is famous for. It's the kind of office that says competent and established without trying to say it. Dark wood, organized shelves, the absence of anything decorative that doesn't serve a function. Mitch is 58, with the specific quality of a Missouri family law attorney who has been doing this long enough to have seen the full range of human behavior in divorce proceedings and is surprised by none of it. He has a handshake that means something and eyes that are reading you from the moment you walk in. Dale had briefed him. He had a copy of the prenuptial agreement on his desk when I arrived. I had found the original in our home files Saturday evening, the manila folder labeled legal documents in Sandra's handwriting that had been sitting in the filing cabinet in the home office for 22 years, undisturbed. Mitch looked at me across the desk. Tell me about the lottery ticket, he said. I told him. The Friday night timing, Sandra bought the ticket on her lunch break at work, her personal account, her personal debit card. The ticket was purchased and held by Sandra individually, not jointly. The winnings had been claimed Saturday morning by Sandra alone, before I was involved in any of the conversations. Mitch wrote while I talked. When I finished, he looked at the prenup, then at his notes, then at me. Billy, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer it precisely. Go ahead. The lottery ticket, was it purchased with joint funds? Joint account? Marital money? No. Sandra has a personal checking account she's had since before we married. She buys the ticket from that account every week. 8 years of tickets, all from her personal account. Mitch nodded slowly. So the ticket itself, the asset that generated the winnings, was acquired with premarital, separate funds, maintained in a separate account. That's correct. And the winnings, where were they deposited? Her personal account. Saturday morning, before she came home. Mitch looked at the prenup again. Read a specific section. Read it again. Then he set the document down and looked at me with the expression of a man who has just found something he needs to show you carefully. The prenup your wife's family drafted in 2003 specifies that marital assets are divided equally in the event of divorce. He paused. It defines marital assets as all assets acquired jointly or through joint effort during the marriage. Another pause. Separately, it specifies that assets brought into the marriage or acquired through separate individual means remain with the acquiring party. Right, I said. Sandra's grandmother's inheritance was protected. That was the point. Correct. That was the intended point. Mitch picked up a pen. But the language cuts both ways, Billy. The lottery winnings, acquired through Sandra's individual effort, with her individual funds, deposited to her individual account. Those are Sandra's separate property under the terms of this prenup. She's correct that she can argue they belong to her alone. Then, I started. However, Mitch held up the pen. The house on 75th Street, purchased in 2009, both names on the mortgage. Both of your incomes contributed to the payment for 16 years. He looked at the document. The house is a marital asset under this prenup. Equal division. Okay. Your pension? You have a pension through your HVAC union? Yes. 16 years of contributions. Marital asset. Equal division. He wrote. Sandra's retirement accounts. She has a 401k, Through her employer? Yes. 22 years of contributions during the marriage. Marital asset. Equal division. He set the pen down. Billy. The prenup Sandra's family had drafted specifically to protect their assets has, in this situation, created an equal division framework for everything you both built together over 22 years. The lottery money Sandra's family thinks makes her untouchable. She's probably right about that. But everything else? He spread his hands. Everything else is half yours. I sat with that. How much are we talking about? I asked. Mitch pulled a pad, started writing numbers. The house? Current market value approximately $800,000. Equity after mortgage approximately $540,000. Sandra's $401K, which I knew was substantial because Sandra had been a diligent saver, approximately $380,000. My pension's present value calculation. 2 vehicles. Joint savings. He added it up. Looked at the total. Before negotiations and depending on final valuations, you're looking at somewhere in the range of 5 to 5.8 million in marital assets, subject to equal division. I stared at the pad. Billy. Mitch looked at me directly. The prenup Phyllis Grover insisted on because she didn't think you were good enough for her daughter? It just made you eligible for half of everything Sandra built during your marriage. The lottery money is hers. Everything else is split. The country club plaza fountains were visible through the window. The Kansas City September morning doing its ordinary thing outside, while I sat in a chair and processed the specific irony of a woman trying to protect her daughter's assets from a man she didn't respect, and writing a document that protected him instead. She's going to be furious, I said. Her attorney is going to be very uncomfortable, Mitch said, which is professionally interesting because Gwen Tully is a good attorney who is going to read this prenup and have a very specific conversation with her client about how this document works. When does Sandra find out? When I send Gwen Tully our initial position letter. Mitch picked up the pen again, which I'm going to draft this afternoon. Dale called me at 2 p.m. I was sitting in the work van in the plaza parking garage because I needed to be somewhere with no one in it for a few minutes. Mitch called me. Dale said, he said to tell you he sent the letter. Already. He said you'd want to know quickly. I looked at the steering wheel, at my hands on it. The calluses that had been there since my 20s. The van with my name on the side. Dale, do you know what Phyllis Grover said to me on the phone Sunday? What? She said sometimes things clarify compatibility. She said they want what's best for Sandra. I paused. She was laughing, Dale. There was a laugh underneath the whole conversation. A woman who thought the math was already done, and she knew the answer. Well, Dale said, the math is done. She just got the answer wrong. I almost laughed, the specific dark humor of a situation that is terrible and absurd in equal measure. How are you actually doing? Dale asked. I thought about that. About 22 years. About Sandra at a company picnic laughing at a joke. About the house on 75th Street and the gutters and the porch light and the driveway I'd sealed on a Saturday. I'm okay, I said. Angry, but okay. The anger is fair. Yeah, I said. I think it is. Wednesday, September 24th. Gwen Tully called Mitch. Mitch called me to relay the substance of the conversation, which was, in his professional summary, Gwen Tully having a difficult day. The summary. Gwen had read the prenup. Gwen had explained the prenup to Sandra and Phyllis. The conversation had apparently not gone well. Gwen is a professional, Mitch said, with the dry appreciation of one attorney for another. She told her client the truth, which was that the document as written supports our position on the marital assets. Sandra is going to push back. She's going to argue that my pension has separate components and that some of the joint savings were from her income specifically. None of those arguments are wrong. They're just not worth what she thinks they're worth, against a 22-year marriage with clean documentation. What's the timeline? Gwen asked for 2 weeks to prepare a counterposition. I said, fine. We're not in a hurry, Billy. The math works in your favor, and the math doesn't change. I didn't know it yet. Didn't know what was going to happen when Sandra came to the house on Wednesday evening, or what Phyllis was going to do when she fully understood the situation she'd built. I didn't know what Ronnie and Lena's reactions were going to be when the story spread through the Grover family, or what that would feel like to watch. I just knew that Mitch Farrow had a prenup on his desk, and the prenup said what it said. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you. For real. Now let's finish this. Sandra came to the house Wednesday evening. She came alone, without Phyllis, without Lena, without the family architecture she'd been operating within since Saturday morning. She sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten 1,000 dinners, and she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since the early years of the marriage. Unguarded, stripped of management. Billy. Her voice was quiet. I owe you an apology. Okay. The way I handled Saturday, coming home from Mom's and just delivering it like that. You deserved better than that. You deserved a real conversation. I looked at my wife, 51 years old, the woman who had won $16.8 million and gone to her mother's house and come back with a decision. Why, Sandra? I asked, not angrily. Genuinely, was it really just the money? 22 years and the money changed everything that fast? She was quiet for a long moment. Mom said, Mom had a lot to say about what this meant for the future, for security, for, your mother has had a lot to say about me for 2 years. She looked at the table. Yes. Did you want the divorce before Friday? I asked. A longer pause. No? Then I need you to understand something. I kept my voice level. Whatever happens legally, whatever Mitch and Gwen work out, that's one thing. But I need you to understand that you walked into this kitchen on a Saturday afternoon after 22 years and delivered a decision you made with your mother in 4 hours. That's what I'm living with. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. I know, she said finally. I know, Billy. We sat at the kitchen table for another few minutes without speaking, the Waldo neighborhood evening doing its quiet thing outside. Then Sandra went home to wherever she was staying, Phyllis's house, I assumed, and I sat at the table alone and thought about what Mitch had said. The math doesn't change. The 2 weeks between Gwen Tully's extension request and the settlement negotiation were, in my professional life, completely ordinary. I went to work. I fixed HVAC units. I drove the van with my name on it to jobs in Overland Park and Lee's Summit and the Westport neighborhood, and I did the work I've been doing for 28 years with the same care I always bring to it because the work doesn't change because your personal life is complicated. What changed was the phone. Ronnie called on a Thursday, Sandra's brother, 48, who works in commercial real estate and has the specific energy of a man who considers himself the family's practical mind. He'd never called me in 22 years, except at holidays. Billy, I just want to say this is getting out of hand. The attorney's fees alone are going to eat into Ronnie, I said. Are you calling to advise me legally? I'm calling his family. You're calling because Gwen Tully told Sandra what the numbers look like, and someone decided I needed to be managed. I kept my voice pleasant. I'm not a problem to be managed, Ronnie. I'm a party to a divorce who has a prenup that says what it says. Call your own attorney. I hung up. Lena called the next day. Lena's approach was warmer. She had always been the smoother operator of the Grover siblings, and she opened with sympathy about the whole situation and how hard it must be, and how she just wanted everyone to be okay. Lena, I said when she'd finished the preamble, what specifically were you hoping this call would accomplish? A pause. I just thought if we could talk, person to person. Lena, the negotiation is between attorneys. I wish you well. I paused. Tell your mother I said hello. I hung up. Dale called that evening, having somehow heard about both calls through the Kansas City social geography that connects people in ways nobody fully tracks. They're nervous, Dale said. They should be. How nervous are we talking on a scale of 1 to Phyllis actually read the prenup? Whereat Phyllis actually read the prenup. Dale laughed, the warm, genuine laugh of a best friend who has been in your corner for 40 years and is enjoying watching the corner pay off. Monday, October 6th, the negotiation meeting, Mitch Farrow's conference room. The table was rectangular and the chairs were leather, and the view was of the plaza fountains, and none of that was relevant to what was happening in the room. Sandra arrived with Gwen Tully. Sandra was dressed carefully, the composed presentation of a woman who has been coached on how to appear in a legal setting. She looked at me when she came in, and the look had things in it I couldn't fully catalog. Phyllis was not present. She had apparently wanted to be. Gwen had apparently advised against it, strongly, Because the last thing you want in a settlement negotiation is the person who drafted the instrument you're trying to argue around sitting at the table making faces. Mitch had the documents organized with the specific efficiency of a man who has done this many times and is not going to waste the room's time with anything that isn't directly relevant. We're here to discuss the division of marital assets under the terms of the 2003 prenuptial agreement, Mitch said in the measured tone of a man setting parameters. Our position is straightforward. The prenup defines marital assets as all assets acquired jointly or through joint effort during the marriage. We have identified the following. He walked through the list. The house, Sandra's $401K, my pension's present value, the joint savings, the vehicles. He gave the total. Gwen Tully had a counterposition prepared. She was too good an attorney not to. She argued the pension's separate component calculation. She argued about the joint savings split. She raised points about some of the house equity percentages. These were real arguments, professionally made. Mitch addressed each one, methodically, with documentation. Sandra watched this exchange with the expression of a woman who had come in believing the prenup protected her completely, and was now watching that belief be revised in real time by two professionals who both understood what the document said. At one point she turned to Gwen and said quietly, "Can they really, the house?" And Gwen, in the way of a good attorney delivering hard truth to a client, "Sandra, the house was purchased jointly. It's in the document." The final numbers, after 3 hours of negotiation and 2 weeks of document exchange, landed here. The house, valued at $810,000 with remaining mortgage of $260,000, equity of $550,000, was to be sold with equal division of proceeds. Sandra could buy out my half if she chose to keep it. She chose not to, because keeping the house required dealing with a mortgage on her own, and her lottery winnings were, at her attorney's recommendation, in a structured arrangement that limited immediate liquidity. Sandra's $401K, $390,000, half to Billy, $195,000, transferred via QDRO. My pension's marital portion, present value calculated, her share approximately $80,000, joint savings in vehicles, approximately $40,000 to Billy after split. Total to Billy White, HVAC technician of Waldo, Kansas City. After the house sale and all transfers, with Mitch's fees deducted, approximately $5.6 million, not 16.8, not the lottery, not what Sandra won by herself on a Friday with a ticket from her personal account. $5.6 million in marital assets that the Grover family prenup, drafted specifically to limit my access to Grover family money, had ensured were divided equally. I sat at that conference table and looked at the final numbers on the document in front of me. Phyllis, I thought, you hired an attorney to write a prenup to protect your family from a man you didn't think was good enough. You wrote it so carefully. You made sure it covered everything. You just didn't consider what 22 years of joint effort would add up to, or what equal division would mean when those numbers landed on a table. I signed the settlement agreement. Dale came over that evening. We sat on the porch of the 75th Street house, the house I'd be leaving when the sale went through, the house with the gutters I'd cleaned and the porch light I'd replaced, and the driveway I'd sealed. Dale had brought beer, the decent kind. We sat in the October Kansas City evening and he looked at me. 5.6, he said. 5.6, I confirmed. From a prenup, Phyllis Grover insisted on. The very one. Dale drank his beer, was quiet for a moment. How's it feel? I thought about how to answer that honestly. It doesn't feel like winning, I said, because the thing I had was 22 years with someone I loved, and that's gone, and no number makes that not gone. No, Dale said, it doesn't. But I looked at the Waldo neighborhood street. The October evening, the specific ordinary beauty of Kansas City in fall. There's a specific feeling when the people who wrote you off discover they miscalculated. When the woman who laughed at your compatibility has to sit across a table from your attorney and watch the document she drafted do the opposite of what she intended. Phyllis is going to need a long time to get over this, Dale said. Probably, I said. That's her work to do. I picked up my beer, looked at the porch light I'd replaced twice over the years, at the driveway I'd sealed on a Saturday while Sandra brought me water. I built this, I thought. Both of us built this. 22 years of Tuesday nights and Saturday mornings and showing up and doing the work. The prenup knew what that was worth even when nobody else did. What are you going to do with it? Dale asked. Buy a truck first, I said. A good one. Not a work van, a truck. Something with my name on it because I want it there. Not because it's a company vehicle. Dale smiled. And after the truck? After the truck. I'll figure it out. I set the bottle down. I've been figuring things out for 54 years. I'm reasonably good at it. You are, Dale said. You really are. We sat on the porch until the October dark came in fully and the Waldo neighborhood went quiet, and the Kansas City night settled over everything with the specific weight of things ending and things beginning, and the long, ordinary, complicated work of going on. I didn't feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had been told what he was worth by the people closest to him, and had found out the hard way that the number they'd assigned him was wrong. $5.6 million wrong, as it turned out. Some miscalculations are more expensive than others. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.